Hey, everybody. I just saw somebody saying, "Are we live?" And honestly, Joanne and I were cracking out something behind the scenes, so we had to wait a second before we could go live. Sorry about that. So, yes, Penny, we are now live. We were live before we turned the camera on, but
we were very live before we turned the camera on.
So we are here in this very serious moment on December 27th, 2025, when Joanne Freeman, Dr. Joanne Freeman of Yale University, she's just shaking her head because she knows it's coming, is going to be directing today's conversation.
What happened? What you need to know is just before we came on, we were like, well, let's just go and see where we go. And Heather said, okay, I have an idea. And I said,
Yes, but Joanne, I actually do have an idea that I think is worthwhile. But the real question is, are you back from your run?
I went running this morning in my slippers.
Oh, well, like around the coffee table, which I know
I did. I went running, yes, around the coffee table in my slippers. At some point, I will have my sneakers here and I'll find a way to like throw them at you or something. But I have not figured that out yet. So.
Well, that's a wonderful segue to today's topic of conversation. And that is, and I have to say, it is, I will confess, I have never been so happy to see a year in the rearview mirror. And that says a lot, because as a 63-year-old woman, I have had some not so good years.
Well, just in the semi-recent past, I mean, I think that is entirely true. And it's, don't you find that, and I've stopped saying this. There was a period when I would say like, well, and that's going to be the worst year, right? It's got to be up from here, right? It's going to be better and then at a certain point during Trump's first administration, it was like, yeah, I'm not tempting fate that way anymore. Just like, well, that was a year.
Yeah, and as everyone says, it turned out that the sub-basement had a sub-basement, and every time we think it couldn't get worse, it does. And I think that that's going to be a lesson going to 2026. But what I would like to talk about today, and I'll tell you why, is this year, in that somebody asked me a week ago what the year had been like for me, and I said I don't remember it. I don't remember anything except working. And then every year for Christmas, Buddy gives me a calendar of the things we have done in each month of the previous year. So we did January and February, and I looked it over the other day, and I'm like, crap, we did a lot that seems like good stuff that seems that it has been sort of overwritten by the craziness of the Trump administration. And that got me sort of looking back at what has actually happened this year. And I'd love to start with what surprised you about this year. And then if we can go into not the bad stuff, because I think that's going to be in the surprises, but the good stuff that happened in this year for you, if you want, but certainly for the nation.
Yeah, no, I think that would be good. I mean, what surprised me? That a surprise might not be the right word, because in some ways, things that happened this year that sort of surprised me kind of didn't. Like I would have assumed they were coming, but even so, when they happened, some part of me was still like, really? So I guess that counts as surprise. And what, again, I'm going to say this and everyone's going to go, really? That surprised you? But the degree to which so many people, media outlets, all kinds of things just immediately folded, just caved, just bent the knee, just like, it didn't surprise me per se, but it was so fast and so thorough and so shockingly small of people to do that.
It's interesting you say that, because as soon as Trump was inaugurated, there were a number of articles in the mainstream press about how there was no more resistance. Everybody was just capitulating. And I remember talking to you at that time and going, excuse me? Like, I'm seeing more people resisting than ever before, and more voices and all that. And that was the first time it really became clear to me that there was a huge divorce between the people who were in the mainstream media and the rest of us.
Yes, and that's really true.
And you still see that. And so it almost felt like they were caving because that's what one did. And the rest of us were like, hell no, that's not what we're going to do.
It was a response in part. I like that way of thinking about it, because I totally agree. Maybe we counteract. So the bad surprise was the degree to which particularly the media just caved. But the positive spin on that is, you're totally right. The ways in which just regular people of all kinds did the opposite, like saw that and were angry in the way that I just was, and stepped up. And whether that meant actually going out into the street and protesting, a lot of people for the first time went out into these marches and protested. People speaking up and people speaking out. I will go right with you there. I think that's a really good way of putting it, is that all kinds of people in the past, I would think to myself, wow, I think Americans understand more the value of democracy, but I think maybe this year they began to understand the value of resistance. And that is something I don't know if people understood before, or even believed could happen. Even now, people are like, what does it mean to march in the streets? Well, it means a lot, because how else we said this before, how do you start a movement? How do you encourage resistance except by doing it? But maybe I like that spin for this last year, a year where people, a lot of people learned the value of resistance and began to figure out ways to practice it.
Well, that's actually where I was hoping to end up. So see you later, everybody.
That happens in seminars all the time. I come in with a long list of things to talk about in a seminar, and then the first student goes like, right to the bottom. I'm like, versus.
Well, but we can go back, I think, and flesh all that out, because when I'm thinking about the stuff that surprised me early on, it was that the Republican senators folded.
Yeah.
You and I talked a lot about that if there was one group of people who cared about their prerogatives, right, it should have been the Republican senators, and they folded like a wet paper bag, including Susan Collins, who had, she and I think it's Patty Murray, who is the Democrat who is at the top of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. Those are positions, and if you're not deep in the weeds like Joanne and I are, you may not know how important different committees are. But getting to be at the top of the Senate Appropriations Committee is like the sort of thing that people dream about for their whole careers. And here Susan Collins is in that peak. First woman ever to be there, I'm pretty sure. And the Department of Government Efficiency, which I still don't think was legal, comes in. And by the way, for those people who wrote to me to say it's pronounced Doge, I knew it was pronounced Doge, but I didn't want to take it seriously, and that's why I've always pronounced it doggy. It was a suggestion of my sound guy. He's like, don't take it seriously.
I have to interject, because I looked this up yesterday for my podcast, my Friday morning podcast, and I thought it was Doge. And there's an argument. It is not. It's not French. There was like a crazy, stupid argument online.
All right, doggy it is.
I think doggy is.
Except I was thinking.
Well, yeah.
But the fact that we watched our democracy and the power of the purse that belongs to Congress being dismantled in real time, in violation both of Supreme Court decisions and of the 1974 Impoundment Control Act, which says the executive branch cannot do anything but spend the money the way Congress told it to. And so many people were like, gee, I wish they wouldn't do that. And
go ahead.
And USAID and everything, that to me was when we came out of the box and I went, this is going to be a hell of a year.
And I would just tweak that by saying, not dismantled. This goes back to what you said a moment ago, like happily ceding their power. It's not even that they were being dismantled. It was like they were just signing off. Like, oh, they're doing this now. Well, we could say, oh, excuse me, but that's our power under the Constitution, right? The Constitution is pretty clear about what the different branches are supposed to do and the rights that they have. And Congress, including the Senate, has seemingly just said, oh gosh, look at that. He's doing that now. He's claiming that right now. He's spending that money now. Huh.
I'm concerned.
Yeah. We've had a lot of concern.
Well, but that's actually an interesting thing. From the beginning, it certainly looked as if this administration was not working within the Constitution at all. That is, they weren't trying to oppose pieces of the Constitution and take them to the Supreme Court the way many presidents do. They were simply saying the Constitution doesn't matter. They were acting extra constitutionally and still are in many ways. And that I think is one of the reasons that early on they were as effective as they were, is that you couldn't figure out who was doing things. We still don't know who was officially the head of Dodgy, as somebody said I should call it, or even now they're still arguing about who signed off on the invocation of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, which is signed in the Federal Register by Donald Trump, and he said he didn't sign it. So there's this sort of, we're not going to play by any of those rules. We're just going to do whatever the hell we want. And good luck having your Constitution and your laws catch up to us, because, it's like Calvin Ball.
Yeah, no, I think that, well, and obviously that's deliberate. It's like, so I suppose you could say, you could give them a little credit for knowing that they are violating the Constitution and at least doing something vaguely to hide that fact, even if it's just doing something behind the scenes and not making it clear who's doing it. No, I think that's totally right. And that's a big, although actually I'll change that. That has been a big way in which they do what they do. But now it's just brazen. Now it's just
right.
Like, so, oh gosh, are we murdering people on the open seas? Huh. There's just no, the Constitution. Do they ever talk about the Constitution?
No, I don't think so. But but that actually is part of the story of this year. I think that it started with them out of the box doing whatever the hell they wanted, implementing Project 2025. And by the way, I await my lavish apology for all those people who said those of us who were calling out Project 2025 in 2024 were wrong, were exaggerating. Trump said he wasn't involved in that. That seems to have been just, brushed under the rug. That
the degree
that
to
was
which
always the plan. And
I totally agree. The degree to which we are among many who were yelling and who were told in one way or another, I certainly was, that I'm hysterical is always a way to smack at a woman, but also that I was, fear mongering, exaggerating, and like making stuff up. It's never going to happen. So yeah, I think there are a lot of us that deserve a big apology.
Apology. But at first they came out of the box fast and started putting this stuff in place. And then very quickly there was pushback, both legal pushback, including from a lot of Trump appointed judges, but also people in the streets. And that, and people getting involved and pushing back against what was happening. And it feels like now both of those trends are accelerating. That is, as the year went on, the administration has been trying to do stuff faster and not and quite openly flouting, for example, the War Powers Act, the 1973 War Powers Act, which says no, he can't do things like bombing small boats coming out of Venezuela. And of course, now we know that was in part, large part, because Miller wanted to bomb Mexico and couldn't. So he ended up finding somebody else to bomb, which does not seem like a good way to start killing people. But now I feel like we are looking at both of these trends accelerating. And so you're seeing them grabbing more and more and doing more and more outrageous stuff. The stuff that happened over the Christmas holiday from the Department of Homeland Security, for example, where they are beating up Santa and, or rather, I'm sorry, that was an Indiana senator, where the Department of Homeland Security has Santa deporting people and ho, 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 go, ho, ho, home, that kind of really brazen cruelty.
Yeah, no, it's blatant. It's cruel. It's at one of the marches in the last year, I saw someone with a sign, and all it said on it was empathy. And she got so much positive feedback. People just came up to her and thanked her for the sign. Because what we're seeing, I don't like the word bullying because it kind of sounds namby-pamby, even though it isn't. But what we're seeing is people who are deliberately performing cruelty to scare people into backing away and shutting up and sitting down. And that's why all of the, nastiness is on social media and everything else, that as we're calling it, rightly so, blatant and in your face. They want it to be blatant and in our face because, and I do agree with you, I think the momentum has shifted somewhat. And unfortunately, I do think what that means is they're going to get more and more blatant and more desperate in trying to scare us into backing down or shutting up. I do think some of that is going to be coming because I don't think people are necessarily sitting down, shutting up, backing up, and allowing things to happen. It gets us back to resistance. But I think that the performance of cruelty, it's the performance component that is particularly important to them. And that's true in so many ways with this administration. It's all a performance. And that doesn't mean it's petty or minor, but it means it's about appearance more than anything else.
Say more about that.
Well, because I think that given that ultimately they have power, but they don't have as much power as they claim to have. They don't have a majority of people behind them. They know that a lot of what they're doing is unpopular. They know and can see more and more people resisting. And in the face of all of that, their logical, or what's logical to them, response is to perform bigger and look more threatening and try and convince people that all of the things that they know they're not, they are. How else can you convince people that they have power that they don't have than by performing that you already have that power? And I think that's just a lot of what we see is a power performance.
Well,
And go ahead.
So I agree with that, but here's my next question about that. We are, let me also interject. I got really frustrated over the course of the year when people would say, why is nobody doing anything? And I'm like, look around you. Like, everybody is doing something. Who is, very few people are. We still need to get the people who are sitting this one out to do something. But boy, I'm seeing so many people engaged who were never engaged before. But what I wonder about is, what are the different directions from which we can puncture that performance? And I think, honestly, you'll appreciate this. I think of birds, little birds who puff really, really, really big to look really powerful. And sometimes it works, but you can also puncture that. And
puncture the bird, please.
Well, no, not the bird.
I know.
But, there are many ways we have talked about it, certainly by using reality and facts and all that. But, one of the things that jumped out to me today is all the stories we're seeing about how that the argument for destroying the federal government, especially through the Department of Government Efficiency, was that it would save money. And in fact, the deficit and the national debt have gone through the roof. Well, during this first year of Trump's second term, through the roof. There are new numbers out today that are just appalling. And, sometimes I think about people talking about the cruelty of ICE and all the ways in which they're breaking the law and the really nasty stuff we're seeing and the performative cruelty and all that. And I think you are literally seeing your tax dollars go to pay for that and to pay for these new detention facilities,
right,
rather than seeing them go to educate your 4-year-old or to pay for health care or to fix your roads or to put in internet in your town. And is that really where you want your hard-earned tax dollars to go? It almost feels like, oh my God, I didn't think of this. It almost feels like we ought to have a revolt around taxes.
Wait, you mean like our tax dollars being spent on things taken from us and spent on things?
My work here is done.
That's it? From a tyrant?
Yes, exactly.
Who's misusing tax money and depriving us of our rights and sending people to courts far away from where they should. Yeah, see, we could just go down the grievances and the Declaration of Independence and just tick off. It's absolutely true. Go ahead.
Well, so actually that was a little, I did not make that connection. But I wonder, first of all, because it's literally your money supporting that. But I got thinking this morning, as one does, about that line from that horrible man about popular government being watered by the blood of tyrants, right? which is often used as an excuse for violence, which I'm always 100% against violence. There's just never it never makes things better, ever, ever. But I wondered if what he was saying was that one feeds democracy. People get fat and happy. And I don't mean that literally, but you sort of feel like, oh, we won this one, like the 1950s or the 1870s or the 1930s. We won this one. We can just go back to, knitting or kayaking or eating M&Ms, just for example. But when that happens, you always have the rise of those people who want power and money. And all of a sudden, when they get power again, people who care about representative government have to remember who they are and what democracy is. And that with something to fight against, we start to say, hey, wait, we want our government to respond to us. And maybe that's what he meant by it. I don't remember what he is watering with the blood of tyrants, but not literally violence so much as the what?
The tree of liberty.
Okay, so that you have to water the tree of liberty, you have to define it against a tyrant. And here we are doing that again.
Well, and I have to say two sentences about Thomas Jefferson, the horrible man. I will say that when Thomas Jefferson was talking about things like that, the spirit of revolution, the spirit of liberty, he's talking about spirit. And he's not really focusing on reality, right? Like the actual shedding of blood. There's an account of him sitting at a dinner table, sort of resting on one hip. I'm doing my Thomas Jefferson impersonation. And throwing off niceties, things like that. Broad statements without looking anyone in the face, right? And making these big sort of pronouncements. But you're totally right in that what he was talking about was the spirit of liberty, the spirit of revolution. He is, French, there's blood in the streets of France, and he's talking about something that's happening in real life, and he's kind of saying, sometimes that has to happen in another country. But he is very much supporting the spirit of revolution, which he assumed started in the United States and was going to spread around the world. But yes, that is what he's talking about, is that spirit rising up in the face of tyranny. That actually, we're going to talk about the revolution. That was what the revolution really was about. The spirit of rising up against tyranny. That yes, it was about taxes. Yes, it was about a lot of things. But in the end, that's why there are all of these quotes from, John Adams says that the revolution was in the minds and hearts of people before, the fighting actually began. It's the spirit of things that motivated people. And you're totally right that spirit rose up in response to what they perceived as tyranny. And when the Stamp Act in particular was something that everyone saw in their everyday life, if they were going to use paper, it had to be stamped paper, which was more expensive. And that included like playing cards and newspapers and legal documents. And suddenly people understood what it meant in a real everyday way. And then that felt like tyranny. And then people began to organize around that. So I think you're actually totally right here's a positive spin on this last year, is that in watching the performative and not just performative cruelty that we've been seeing, that has been inspiring people to have a response, even if they don't know it initially. How can you not have an emotional response to just looking at ICE, just looking at the scenes we see from ICE? They want us to have a response. We're just not having the response they want. The response that a lot of people are having is, that's not right. That shouldn't be allowed. What can we do about it? That's the spirit of resistance. And that's some of what we've been seeing this last year.
So first of all, I'm horrified that I'm channeling Thomas Jefferson. But second of all, so I increasingly think that we are living through this fourth great revolution in the United States, political revolution in the United States, that mirrors that. Okay, I'll give you the American Revolution too, so maybe fifth. American Revolution, the 1850s, the 1930s, and
1960s.
I can't. Well, I think you could argue that the 1960s are a continuation of the 1930s, but I'll give you the 60s if you want. You can have LBJ.
Thank you.
But well, we could fight about the 60s, but do you think that's fair that we are once again rediscovering democracy?
Well, I definitely think, yes, that we are rediscovering democracy, and ironically, rediscovering what the government can do and should do, right? I remember years ago seeing, before X was X, but when in the days of Twitter, and I was pronouncing as ever about democracy, and someone said, and now that I'm thinking about it, it sounds very much like a line from Life of Brian, and it wasn't meant that way, but it was someone essentially saying, what has the government ever done for us? Which is like, what have the Romans ever done for us? Well, the aqueducts, although the roads too, but that's Life of Brian. But what has the government ever done for us? And, some of the response was like, well, okay, let's think about things like, I don't know, the postal service. And suddenly, you like good roads, for example, and people started talking about everyday things that people hadn't realized actually are our tax dollars and the government. And that's where that comes from. So yeah, I do think that in that spirit, people are discovering what democracy means. They're actually discovering, sadly, and they're going to discover more as this new year begins, what the government can and can't do, and the good and very negative things it can do, like health insurance, that is going on right now. They're discovering democracy in part, but obviously by it being threatened. And by it being threatened, suddenly the sense of loss or fear or threat drives home the meaning of democracy in a way that I don't know a more powerful way to do it. You and I can scream about democracy as much as we want, about the value of it and the meaning of it, and the fact that, our country should be, and sometimes has managed to be, grounded on it and needs to be more grounded on it going forward. But that kind of discussion is not going to have the impact of people feeling suddenly deprived of something by the government and they have no way to refute it. I think the lack of due process, which sounds like an ism, ethereal ism floating above our head, I think the more that we see American citizens, who clearly are American citizens, being targeted by ICE without any due process, meaning without any chance to say, hey, really, I am a citizen, I deserve, the judicial system to allow me to prove that, people will more and more understand the ways in which their rights are being eliminated. And because of that, we'll have a nearer and dearer and more intense understanding of what democracy is. And that is indeed the sort of thing that encourages a spirit of resistance and a spirit of shared cause, shared purpose. That's 2026. I would like to see even more of a sense of committed shared purpose, because the only way we're going to do anything is together.
So tempting though it is to leave on that note, because that's you just said it all. I got to ask you, if we're right, and I think I think we are. Did you ever think you would be living through one of the great crises in American history as a historian?
No. So no, in a million years. And I'll put a slightly personal spin on it. So first of all, the answer to that is no. Number one, I would not have imagined I'd be living through it. Number two, I wouldn't imagine that I would be publicly screaming about it in every way I possibly could. So I wouldn't have seen myself as the sort of person who steps forward and does what I've been doing.
100%.
Right? I'm a historian. I like going into archives and looking at dead people's mail. This is what I like to do.
That's right.
I'm not a person who's going to do what we do. So all of that. But I'll also say, and this has been and continues to be really hard for me, and you and I occasionally have talked about this, as someone who's Jewish and who grew up being told that you never know when your country's going to turn on you. You never know when you're going to be forced out or attacked or hoarded off into, you never know, that you're never entirely safe. And that's been the story of the Jews forever. So I was raised with that in a very real way. I was raised being told I needed to have a lot of kids to make up for all of the people killed during the Holocaust, which, sorry, I really goofed on that command. But because it was so real to me, I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be alive in a period that brings that back, not on a daily basis, but close to the feeling that, I don't know, will people be coming for us in one way or another? And I don't expect, a knock on the door tomorrow, but the simple idea that ICE is performing precisely what I grew up being told about, add that to the pile of things that I still, as much as we are into the crisis that we're in, I still can't believe that on a certain level. So all of this together, that we're living through this obvious historical crisis, that we're living through this challenge to democracy, that we're living through this moment when just fundamentally as an American and as a Jewish American, I feel threatened. No, I wouldn't have anticipated any of that, but this gets us back to where we started and lets us close on a positive note. Because given all of that, the degree to which you and I and many others have stepped up and essentially said, oh yeah, really? Like you think you're going to do that and we're just going to sit here and nod and allow it to happen. No, we're going to do everything we can do to stop that from happening. And you and I have been doing that for a while, but now other people are too. And I not only do I salute that, it profoundly moves me to see people encouraged and to gain that spirit of independence and activism in every positive sense of the word, and to understand that as I said before, it's in community and in working together that we're going to have an impact. All of that, that's not something I necessarily assumed I would see either in my lifetime. And that's profoundly moving to me.
The only thing I can add to that, Joanne Freeman, is I'm so happy to be doing this with you.
So when we said, what are we happy for the last year? This was going to be a thing I was going to point to, is us doing this. Us being here and doing this over the course of the last year. I realize that it would be good if we didn't feel the need necessarily to be here every Saturday morning, but I love being here every Saturday morning with you. I love working and fighting by your side. It despite the circumstances, it is a happy-making, inspiring, joyful thing for me to be working with you in this way.
Back at you. And I just have to point out to those people who are listening, you will note it did take us about 6 months to figure out how to do it.
I know.
And we finally have found a time that we can mostly make. Which, truthfully, if anything symbolizes the degree to which ordinary people with ordinary skills are taking back this country, I think you and I represent that, because it's like, crap, there's got to be a button here somewhere. You know?
Do you know, floating around out there in the world, I don't know if you remember when we were first beginning our podcast and they were like, Heather and Joanne, show people how to find something on social media, right? Or how to find your podcast. And we were like, gunk.
They literally had my wonderful boy Sam saying, okay, ladies, pick up your phones.
Yes.
So let's do this. I mean, I believe we're leaving the year of the snake and entering the year of the horse, which is forward thinking and powerful and has momentum and changes the world for the good. So let's
we're all going to do together, folks. That's it. We're all here. All of you who are here, and I don't know how many you do, however many who are here, we're already doing it together.
Yeah. I will say I'm tired. It's been a lot, because we haven't been at this just for a year. And I'm loving seeing new people come in because they have all this enthusiasm and all this energy that some of us just don't have. Not that we're not behind the cause, but sometimes I just fall asleep at my desk. And it's lovely to see more and more people taking up the torch and carrying it forward. And I think it, like you, I didn't ever think I would ever think I would be in a position like this. When I think about doing research, one of my happiest places ever was sitting at an underground carrel next to GovDocs at Harvard. Just me, like, and the green lights. And I was reading the congressional record. And I remember sitting there and thinking, I am so happy.
Right.
And,
Well,
and now look at us, right? Um, but I feel very fortunate to be in this moment and to be able to do something to carry forward the torch that the people before us carried.
to be able to do something, and even better, to be able to do something together. Yes.
Right.
And to bring meaning to the people and things that we study.
Yes.
We're
Yes, who
living.
knew they were so damn current?
I know, it's true. But that's legacy.
I'm over here taking notes.
Oh. Meanwhile, I'm just sipping coffee from a mug about history. It says, "History now, and a record of the triumphant, terrible, and ceaselessly astounding stories throughout time."
Can't argue with that.
No.
And now we're part of one.
And now we're part of one. Well, Heather, I salute our teamwork going forward. I just, like I said already, it's just, despite the fact, the reason why we do this, it's just always a joy.
100%, Joanne. I'll let you go so you can go out for a run. And
I'm going to go walk in Central Park in the snow.
yeah, and I just told you I'm sending you yak tracks so that you don't slip.
Yeah.
Love you, Joanne. Thanks for this. Thanks for a great 2025 with you anyway. And you know what? Wouldn't it be great if by the end of 2026 we could just talk about history?
Oh, I salute that with my cold coffee.
Back at you.
I love you, Heather.
Take care. We'll see you in the new year.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you for coming. I think we're still going.
Hit the wrong button.